Hare Krishna. Thank you for tuning in again. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my obeisances. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paschatate Satani Om Ajnana Timirandasya Janatana Salakaya Chaksus Meritanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jayatam Surito Pangur Mamamanda Matirgati Matsarvasva Patambojo Radha Madana Mohan. Well, quick review. This is on relations. We're continuing on. Last week we went over a couple points of the Vedas. The knowledge that we're receiving is coming through disciplic succession, which makes it very special. It's called Aparushaya or Aparushaya, which means it's not man-made. It's free from the four defects. So, to continue on today, I was going to point out, I had a little acronym that I came up with this morning called BCOL. So this BCOL will be how it affects our relationship with Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it starts off where Arjuna is speaking to Krishna many, many nice principles. The whole first chapter, he has all kinds of wonderful moral and ethical principles he's presenting to Krishna about if we kill these all the men, then the women won't be protected, there'll be unwanted progeny, and when the tradition is broke, then the unwanted progeny, the Varna Samskars, won't perform the correct rituals, so the forefathers that were in hell will stay in hell. There won't be anybody doing the Shraddha ceremony. So many principles. And after explaining all that, Krishna starts off in the second chapter, in the 11th verse. He says, Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living or the dead. And what Srila Prabhupada pointed out in the purport was, the Lord at once took the position of a teacher and chastised a student, calling him indirectly a fool. He says, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know what is learned. One who knows what is the body and what is the soul. So that's what I thought is always the first ABC in the Bhagavad Gita. That first, you don't know. We're stuck in this material world, undergoing suffering, one body after another. We've lost our connection with Krishna, and there's no way in the material energy to ever reestablish that. One gets the mercy, Guru Prasade, Brahmanda Bhumite Kona Bhagavana Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade, Bhaktalada Bij. He gets contact of that transcendental potency, the spiritual potency, through the spiritual master. And just like Arjuna got instructed, so Krishna starts giving this information. At the first point is how we've all heard Prabhupada say, you're not this body. How many times he said that? So I thought we would discuss a little bit about this bodily conception of life. In fact, just this morning when I wake up early, it's a special time for me. I think about Krishna consciousness comes in very strongly at that time. So this morning I thought of it as, I had that little acronym, BCOL. And I sometimes like to put it into a way that we could remember it. So I thought of it like a computer virus, since that's something most of us are familiar with nowadays. And this would be called a a Trojan virus, because the Trojan ones are known because you let them in thinking that they'll be good for something good, and it turns out that you were tricked and it wasn't good. So this illusion, if we think about it for a minute, how serious it is, because it's perhaps the most deadly, quick-acting illusion that one can be in, this bodily conception of life. And most of us who have tried to participate in Krishna consciousness or understand this philosophy understand it requires some control of the mind, fix the mind on Krishna. And Maya's service is to check out your sincerity, protect Krishna, and give you a distraction. So it's not very difficult. In the mode of goodness, which is your introspection, you're looking inside instead of outside. But the outside, the senses are still very active. And when you look at something, hear something, smell something, unless you're highly trained to etavadeva jignatvam, connected to Krishna, most likely, what I call it is the default setting, is that you go back into seeing it in the bodily conception of life. So I've noticed sometimes now, because of practicing Krishna consciousness for most of my life, I'm trying to chant nicely and I'm concentrating on Krishna, and then I look up, and if I see something that catches my eye, I notice all my realizations, all my philosophy, all that the results of my austerity can disappear in a half of a second, just like that. Boom. And you're back in the bodily conception of life. However, Prabhupada has given us a nice safety net of a sadhana. So in our sadhana, we can bring, I call it sadhana a reset button. When you wake up, generally you're coming out of ignorance, and there's three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But basically you can pick two out of three. So before the sun comes up in the morning, that's goodness. Once the sun comes up, that's passion. Got a lot of stuff to do, got to get started, no time for anything else. And in the evening, it's a time you're generally tired and relaxing, and generally most activities in the evening, mode of ignorance is prominent. So you get to pick two. So if you get up early, then you'll probably go to bed early, so you'll miss ignorance. If you get up a little later and just hit it when the sun comes up, you'll hit the mode of passion, hit the ground running, so to speak, and then stay up a little bit later to unwind, and then you start to cycle over again. So mostly passion and ignorance. If you get up early, you have some goodness, and in that goodness it may hold out through some of the passion part of the day, where you've had a good mangala, a good auspicious start to the day. So when I was thinking about this morning, I started writing down these are my little notes. If people know me, I always have a little piece of paper and I write down notes as they come to me. And I was just thinking of this most deadly form of illusion that we must be trained to see, understand, and then reject it. He says, can get you in a second, just a moment's inattention. Srila Prabhupada would often call it like shaving. He says if you're shaving, you're handling a razor, so you can get a nice close shave, but if you become inattentive while you're handling that razor, then you can cut yourself very easily, because the razor is sharp. So throughout the time at our stage of life, we're trying to always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. Until that attachment develops, it's a bit of a struggle. Once the maturity comes, then naturally your relationship with Krishna is satisfying. You're getting a taste, the param jasvanavardante, and that taste, that leads you to attachment. And that attachment, that's what we want, that rag, to attach to Krishna. Sometimes I ask the question, maybe I'll ask this, I'll try it out tonight. What's the difference between, there's two sayings. One saying is out of sight, out of mind. And another saying is absence makes the heart grow fonder. So there are two different sayings. What would make one turn into the other and the other turn into the other? So I'll get back to that, and I'll see if anybody writes in, right? You can see if anybody would write in the answer, what you think that is, and we can go back to that. Because that's actually, I like those kind of questions because it shows if you're thoughtful about the condition of the heart. Well, that was a hint. Oh well. So you can get captured by this most formoid type, this most deadly form of illusion very quickly by the bodily conception of life. And it can keep you under its control for millions of births and deaths. So it's a very serious mental adjustment that one needs to do. Correct his attitude and relationship to Krishna. And once you get covered by it, you don't even know. Because one of the things I was noticing, like a virus, the very first thing that the bodily conception of life does is it disables your intelligence. What I'd like to make ways to remember things easy. So I say your intelligence is out of order. So what does it mean your intelligence is out of order? It's kind of a play on words. It can mean two things. One, it's broken. Like if you go up to a soda machine and it says out of order, it means it's broken. Alright, so your intelligence is broken. It's not working. And out of order also means that it's not in the proper sequence of the hierarchy. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, chapter 3, text 42. I'll read that once to you, the English. It says, the working senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses, and the intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So when your intelligence is out of order, it's under the control, it's being controlled by the mind, which is being controlled by the senses and the sense objects. So instead of your intelligence functioning properly, it's out of order, and it's getting its intel. Like in the military, they have a group that are called the intelligence, or the intel, and they give information where the enemy is. And if they get the wrong intel, they may bomb the wrong place, they may hit their own men. So if you get bad intel, you don't know your friends from your enemy. That's what happens with bad intel. So when your intelligence is out of order, it's picking up its intel from the senses and the sense objects and the mind, which is part of what the bodily conception of life is about. That's how the bodily conception of life is about. So that's bad intel. It's called empirical knowledge coming through the senses. However, Krishna is so kind, he sets up a rendezvous. This is another way that I think about it, is that Krishna says, who would like to meet Krishna? Why not? So he says, where would you like? He says, well, here's where I'll meet you first. I'll meet you in your intelligence. I'll give you this special way I'm going to communicate to you in your present condition through your intelligence. First, we've got to clean it up a little bit, get it in order, as opposed to being out of order And then through your intelligence, I'll guide you all the way out of this illusion back to Godhead. He says that 10:10 te samsatatam yuktanam. So we're developing our relationship to Krishna, and we're learning how to see it His way. You know, the song, it says, just try to see it my way. So Krishna is saying, just try to see it His way. And that's, I think I read that last time, that 4:29:69. Seeing it Krishna's way. So when we see it Krishna's way, He establishes communication with us through the mercy of this pure devotee, through our intelligence. So you want to keep your intelligence in order, not out of order, getting its intel from the scriptures and from Krishna, which is aparashaya. It's not man-made, doesn't have the 4 defects. Then you have an opportunity to see things as they are. What's the verse that says, Acharya Van Purusha Veda. For one who has the Acharya giving him instructions, he knows things as they are. So the first thing that happens is you become understanding that there's something besides the bodily conception of life. It captures it and takes you out of it by pointing out that this is what is called the mode of passion. Mode of passion is the bodily conception of life, and it runs, like Prabhupada said, the animals run on 4 legs, we run on 4 wheels. But we run after the same things: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So, I have some quotes here about the bodily conception of life. This is the way I study. I usually pick out a phrase like that and do a string search on the query, and then I select it, copy and paste it, and make a Word document, and then I study it a little like that. So here's some of the ones that I have. One's seeing power should be increased through knowledge of spirit and matter, and one should not unnecessarily identify himself with the body and thus become attracted by bodily relationships. So, of course, it's not saying that these bodily relationships are something to be neglected. It's just to see them in the proper perspective. When you learn to revive, awaken your dormant love for Krishna, it's not that you have less affection for everyone. You have more affection, but it's the proper affection. It's affection for the person that's in the body, more than just the body. When it's for the body, it's a type of exploitation. And Krishna says if you have a spiritual master, you won't be in that illusion anymore. He says, 4:35, 4:34, he says, if you want to know the truth, of course that chapter is about sacrifice, and this is the best to, if you want to know the truth about sacrifice, you'll approach someone who's realized the truth. The top Van, he understands, or darshan, tattva darshan, he sees the truth. He can impart the knowledge to you, and he says that when you thus learn the truth, you will know that all beings are in me or mine. So I think we went over that also the other day. Like the wedding band, you say, oh, this person is with someone else. So when you have the spiritual master, and you understand that everybody is to be enjoyed by Krishna. That's our nature, and we're to assist Krishna and a living entity, because that's how every one of us becomes happy in our relationship with Krishna. So here's another verse. That was from 3:27:9. The next one is, those who are attracted to the perishable body can hardly enter the realm of the science of Godhead. The whole material world, based on the conception of the material body as the self, is ignorant of the science of God. The materialists are always busy, working for the welfare of the material body, not only for his own, but also for his children, kinsmen, community, countrymen, etc. So these go on and on. I don't feel so comfortable reading because I think it's harder to follow. But if anybody is interested in the subject, all these are Word documents, and I could easily attach them to an email if anybody would want them, and I could send them over if one would like to make a study of that too. So the way that I've developed this more so is that, like the first verse that I read was, one's seeing power should be increased. So we were talking about intelligence, and intelligence Prabhupada defines as a power to analyze something in the proper perspective. So in order to see it properly, there needs to be a light, some sort of a light. So we're in our introspection. The light of our introspection is our ability to discriminate one thing from another. The sharper, the more wattage you have, the easier you can discriminate. So I have another paper here, which will go over a little bit of how to increase your wattage of your internal light so you can make the proper discrimination and have your intelligence bright enough to show you the path back home, back to Godhead. Like Krishna says, for those who are constantly devoted, we'll give you that intelligence. So as Prabhupada gave it to us and to myself, I'm sharing it with you and digest it a little bit on how I've processed this. So I made a column called the external energy, which what we're talking about is fruitive activities, the bodily conception of life. So the bodily conception of life, which is how this material illusion works, is that you have senses, sense objects, and then they're grouped about the mind. The intelligence, when it's out of order, tries to engage the senses with the sense objects. And then when he sees something, he has desire, which is in the mind, and that's your subtle body, and it goes from body to body like that. So that's conditioned life. And then spiritual life is almost the opposite of that, is that we see how there's actually an attraction for Krishna that generates a creativity out of love, something you want to do for Krishna. And Krishna, Kandarpakoti, he's so charming that how he relates to you thinking of him, because he's happy that you're thinking of him, and then he reciprocates with you, and this synergy is our spiritual nature, because we don't actually exist separate from Krishna. So you are actually you and Krishna, how you're acting when you're acting with Krishna. So I made this little paper where I have one column. You can also do this at home. I don't know if they used to have Winky Dink kits. That may be before everybody here. I'm dating myself, but back in the 50s, there was a piece of plastic film that you would get and you would put onto your TV screen, and a grease pencil. And as the show went on, you would put little hints in this grease pencil on the Winky Dink screen. And then as the mystery was unfolding, you would have all these clues that you've been putting on piece by piece. But anyway, that was a long time, 50 years ago. Anyway, so if we come up with some synonyms, characteristics of fruitive activities, let's see if we can come up with any. Something that's another way is saying fruitive activity. Another way is saying the external energy. So how about karma? It's almost the same thing. Karma means fruitive activities. Sense gratification, the bodily conception of life. I am the enjoyer. The ascending process, self-centeredness, is temporary, it's conditioned. It has the false ego, bondage, fear, controlled by the modes of nature, not connected to Krishna. It has pride, sinful activities, illusion, speculative knowledge. That's all part of fruitive activities. Lust, thinking I'm the enjoyer. Also, when you're in the bodily conception of life, you're alone. You're always trying to be, well, some people want to be with others, but you actually aren't, you can't connect so well because they're also an illusion. So you're alone. Actually, only devotees aren't alone. But some of the other characteristics that you may notice is that you always blame others. You're disturbed. Your thinking is not satisfied. Just the very nature of the bodily conception of life, the senses are not good masters. You think you're the master. It's cunning, complex, calculating. This is my list. When you're in this influence of the senses and the sense objects, it's intoxicating. So, in fact, I was thinking about it this morning, and I called it it's a psychotic episode. The false ego puts you into a psychotic episode because you don't even know who you are. And if that's one of the definitions of psychotic, is that you don't know who you are and you don't know what reality is. So by definition, our material existence is a psychotic episode. It has cheating religion. It bases everything on the imperfect senses. It's compared to a blazing fire because you can't satisfy it. I know that one time I probably gave that example of when I went to sleep one time when I was very thirsty. And in my dream I was drinking so much water. But none of the water I drank in my dream ever satisfied me. So that example is used that in this material world you can't satisfy your desires because they're not coming from the desires themselves are coming from the soul, not from the matter. We impose them into the senses, so they can't be satisfied. Lost the capacity to remember his previous position and can't recognize his present position. Knowledge acquired is based on a false premise. Prabhupada would say, if you did a math problem and in the first line you said 2 and 2 is 5, the rest of the problem, no matter how good you are, is always off. So when you start off identifying with your body, then everything else in your life can never be correct. You have to start off with the soul. So then we have the soul's lost. You forgot Krishna. There's I and mine. There's lust. And you're regulated by the whims of the senses. So that's one column. That's called the external potency. So then you make another column, if anybody's doing this at home. It's a very nice exercise. You think of how this originally came to me. I was saying, do I know anything? In Krishna consciousness, you learn so many things, but what do you know? So I was thinking, all right, what is the basic discrimination that we have to tell? You have to be able to tell fruitive activities from devotional service. And if you notice, almost in all of your reading of Bhagavad Gita, it gives you that distinction. This is fruitive activities, don't do it. This is devotional service, do it. And it's helping you understand that. So in the devotional service, I have another column. So we have one column called the external potency, fruit of activities, bodily conception of life. And we have another column now on the other side of the page called transcendental, devotional service, internal potency. It's absolute. It's descending, perfect knowledge. It's divine, eternal. It has our correct position, relationship to Krishna as his servant. It has freedom, freedom from anxiety, freedom from the modes of nature, happiness, real happiness from serving Krishna. There's humility. It's free from karma. It's got perfect knowledge. And actually the knowledge is, it's living. Knowledge isn't words on a page. Knowledge is the interaction of Krishna allowing you to see. That's another aspect maybe we can go into sometime, is how this Krishna and his knowledge are non-different. So it's not a dead object. It's actually interactive. So when how you're relating to this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is how you're relating to Krishna. If you say, okay, Krishna, I got it now, but you're not going to listen to it, you may have an experience later on in your life that you may not be listened to. And then you can say, gee, this doesn't feel good. I was trying to help this person and they didn't even listen to me. Maybe you have some children. You'll have that experience. That's another topic that I can get to, how these experiences in our life are given to us by Krishna so we can understand what it's like when you give love and you don't have it reciprocated properly. The unrequited love of this world is a chance for us to not just suffer, but understand that in our relationship to Krishna, we cause Krishna to suffer. I found the word is pararamata, that Krishna has two natures. He has Atmarama, self-satisfied. Then he also has this pararamata. Para means others, Rama means pleasure. That he gets pleasure from others. That's why we're here, to give pleasure to Krishna. So when we're not acting in our relationship to Krishna, he's unhappy about that. It causes Krishna pain. And that's another meaning of sinful activity. That's in the journey of self-discovery, if you want a documentation on that. And there's also in a lecture Srila Prabhupada gave in, I think it was 1975, on April 24th in Vrindavan. So, we're still on the column of the transcendental potency. I hope this isn't too hard to follow. But as it's satisfied, it's self-realized, it's simple, sober, transcendental, it's the truth, it's under Yoga Maya, it's compared to the soothing sunshine, moonshine, soothing moonshine, Nita Parakamalam Koti Chandra. We become regulated, fixed in consciousness, peaceful. So now we have two columns. So that reminds me of the verse from the Sri Upanishad. It says, only one who can learn the process of nescience, fruit of activities, that of transcendental knowledge, side by side, that's just what we did, can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death, and enjoy the full blessings of immortality, the Sri Upanishad, Mantra 11. So now we have two columns. We have the process of nescience, and we have transcendental knowledge side by side. So we're going to add one more column. Anybody know what we're going to call that column and where we're going to put it? All right. We'll put it right in the middle, and we'll call it choice. So here's our choice. We're the category of the living entities. here is Tatashta Shakti, which means marginal, which means he can go to either side of the page. He can go, because in order for there to be love, there has to be a choice. So here's the choice: devotional service or fruitive activities. And if you followed along with me or you made your own chart, I have these, and if anybody wants, they can email me. I think we had the email last time, Madan108 at Gmail. We can continue this. It's a very nice little workshop. So now we have the third column in the middle, which is the use of our intelligence, or surrender, or sadhana, where we're making the choice one way. Forgetfulness, we make the choice the other way. So when you look at this one little piece of paper now, you have the internal potency, the external potency, and the marginal potency. So let's call that a light. Dvipa, Bargo, there's different names that people use for it. Like, if the Brahmins are listening, they know that they have a mantra that is expanded out of Om. And of course, if you look at Om, it looks like a 3, a little smiley 3. And if you want to use this to be your light of Om, it'll work very nicely, because whether you're in Bu, Bhava, Swa, Tat, Savitor, this divine ability to discriminate matter from spirit, it will give you that enthusiasm which is coming from the spiritual nature. And that enthusiasm, of course, as the mantra continues on, we recognize it's coming through our spiritual master, who is very happily engaged in transcendental pastimes with Krishna. So one thing about Krishna, I like to make little sayings up. So like it says, if you touch something that's hot, you feel hot. Touch something that's cold, you feel cold. So if you touch Krishna, what does Krishna feel like? Well, Krishna, Sat, Chit, Ananda. So if you touch Krishna, you feel Sat, Chit, Ananda. So we have Krishna Anandaya. You're naturally coming in contact with Krishna, so you feel your natural Sat, Chit, Ananda. So that's... did anybody come up with the answer to the question that what is the difference between out of sight, out of mind, and absence makes the heart grow fonder? Anybody write in? No. Okay, I'll give you the answer then. It's basically attachment. He says sometimes if you see someone or something, you become very interested, but as soon as they're not there, you don't remember them at all. And when you become attached to someone, you think about them all the time, whether they're present or not. They just keep popping up into your mind. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, that you should always think of him. He says, but if you can't, because you're not attached, then, he says, you'd follow the sadhana. And if you follow the sadhana, it has an effective stage. The Vaidhi Bhakti stage is you're doing it out of obligation to the order of your spiritual master to please him. But after you do that for a while, you get some of the bigger chunks of dust off of the heart. You start to actually enjoy doing your sadhana, and you become attached to it. So then it's called Raga Nuga. So in that Raga Nuga stage, you're always thinking of Krishna. And then you can see how it works. You're starting to contact. Once your heart's involved, everything becomes so much easier to understand. Just like a young boy and a young girl that get attached to each other, they practically can't do anything else. You can look at sometimes maybe a 7th or 8th grader's notebook, and they'll have the boyfriend or the girlfriend's name written all over it. They can't stop saying their name. They can't think about anything else. They can't stop writing it, because that's what the nature of attachment is. And this world It's a reflection. What's a reflection? A mirage. Mirage is, it looks just like the real substance, can get you excited like the real substance. The only thing is it can't satisfy you, because ultimately it's not coming from the soul. It was coming through the, what do we call it earlier? Intelligence that's out of order. So that was the simple points that I wanted to make. If you have any questions or comments about the things that I'm talking about, it would be easy for me, and it would help direct what I'm saying if you write them in. The way that it works, it appears on the screen, and you would tell me, right, if something comes in. Do they know you're here? You tell me you're here. So that's where I was going to go, and I have a little bit more on basically our relationship with Krishna. We're learning how to relate to Krishna, and in order for it to be loved, there's choice. So that Om is our choice, and that's the light that we can see in this world. We can see no matter in any circumstance, in any place, from the lowest to the highest planetary system. For the jiva, it's just about the choice. After that, Krishna either reciprocates with us if we choose to be with him, or if we don't, then we get covered. Maya will say, got you covered. Don't worry about a thing, except birth and death. So, to continue along with this choice, we could bring this up how many different places in the Bhagavatam this is brought up, or in the Bhagavad Gita. Just like all through the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, and at the end he says, well, you can see things clearly now, do what you want. He never tells you what to do. He gives you your choices and the consequences, what will happen, and then he says you do what you want, because the supreme sanctuary, what I like to call it, of your choice is so special, because you have to offer yourself to Krishna. You can't be demanded that you must love Krishna. Of course, your parents may say that to you, but it only works. Oh, there's a question. Should I read it? Or you read it? Which one? Bhaktin Carol. From what you said, do you mean that we are with Krishna right now, and how we are acting right now is how we are acting with Krishna? Could you say more on this? All right, well, I'm going to answer that one first. We'll go over that a little bit. That's very nice, because there's this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I think it's 7:19, Vasudevam Sarvamiti, Sa Mahatma Ladurlabha. It says when one actually comes to knowledge, he recognizes that Vasudeva, Krishna, is everything. So, does that mean before we realize that Krishna is not everything? Or he's always everything, we just haven't realized it? To me, I thought it means Krishna is always everything, we just haven't realized it. We're always dealing just with Krishna. However, at this particular stage, we're kind of impersonally dealing with him. That's why Nirvisesha Sunyavadi, Srila Prabhupada came to teach us how to deal with Krishna directly, not indirectly, not impersonally, but personally. So, for instance, if in the Bhagavad Gita, it mentions that there's 5 items that you'll get as the way that knowledge gives you the ability to see. Those are in knowledge, see a particular way. I can read a couple of them. It's at the end of chapter 13. Uh, So it says, starting in 19, chapter 13, text 19, thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the noble have summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus obtain my nature. Sounds good. You like to have Krishna's nature. Material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations are the modes, and the modes of nature are products of the material nature. I'm going to go and skip a couple. Yet in this body, I skipped to 23, is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and the permitter, and is known as the Supersoul. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, the interaction of the modes of nature, is sure to obtain liberation. I always like that. I like these ones where assured he will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. That sounds good, right? Regardless. Some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. So here's how you can see how Krishna is everything. He says there are different ways. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others, like us. Because of this tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. O Chief of the Bharats, know that whatever you see in existence, both moving and non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. A couple more. One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and understands that neither the soul nor the super soul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. So I like, if you do some studying, this is another one of those that it's nice to do, is actually sees. What are we supposed to be actually seeing? Because right now, we don't see so much. One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere in every living entity does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination. So your mind will degrade you if you're not seeing this. Who wants to have a mind degrading? So you have to learn how to see like that. One who sees all activities are performed by the body, which is created by material nature, and sees itself does nothing, actually sees. You may be thinking of the word bhajan rahasya, that there's a mystery behind all this. Krishna is very mysterious. When a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies, and sees how the beings are being expanded everywhere, he obtains the Brahman conception. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. One of the ways that they explain that, easy to understand at our stage, is the air is always pure. It may carry elements of dirt in it when it goes to the city, smog, or if it goes by a bathroom, picks up that fragrance, or by a bakery, picks up another fragrance. But the air is always the air. It's just carrying particles, molecules of these other substances, but the air is actually not mixing with it. The air is always the same, it just carries it. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything. Same point. Although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in the Brahman vision does not mix with the body, although situated in it. Because Krishna is not bluffing, Prabhupada is not bluffing. They're giving us this ability to see this. So, a couple more verses. Those who see with the eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body can understand the process of liberation from the bondage of the material body and obtain the supreme goal. So that's what we were talking about today, this light. So where Krishna, as a super soul, he deals with us one way when we're completely ignorant. But when we're interested to learn about him, he takes personal interest. He sends his devotees. It's called Ado Shraddha, that in the beginning there's a little bit of an interest about this. It's generating some curiosity. Oh, this is nice to know about. So then you start to say, I want to know a little bit more. And then you think, well, actually this is very important. So where would I find somebody? So you start associating with the devotees. And then with the devotees, you think, this makes a lot of sense. This makes more sense than anything else. Because you're hearing what Prabhupada would say, we're all old. You said, well, how are we all old? Especially back then everybody was in their 20s. He said, well, old means someone who's about to die. He says, how long will you live? Do you know? I said, no, we don't know. Could you die right away? He said, yeah, I could die at any time. He said, well, then you're old. Because you could die at any time. So we thought, okay, this makes more sense because this human form of life is very rare. We know there's 8,400,000 species, which is a whole lot of species. If you go up to a tree or a cat or a dog, how many more lifetimes before they're in a human form? What year will be? What planet will be? Who can even imagine when that'll ever happen? So we made it to the human form of life, but there's so much Kali Yuga going on. It's like a big storm of sense gratification going on. But we've come in contact with a pure devotee, and they're giving this knowledge that I can honestly say it makes more and more sense all the time. That you can, this vision that they're talking about, it's not unattainable. It actually just makes really good sense. Because it's not hard to see. As soon as you fill out this paper, like I was talking about, you see fruitive activities. As soon as you stop performing fruitive activities, even for a moment, you're separate from them. And as soon as you're separate from them, you're actually separate from birth and death also, which is a nice byproduct. And then you can see it. You're seeing that I'm making this choice to go back into this or not to go back into it. So then you think, I'm going to become a devotee. So then there's bhajana kriya, the next stage where your bhajan, your relationship with Krishna is now the focus. You're developing your bhajan. And it's a practice, because most things, if you don't know how to do it, you practice, you train yourself, because you still have a habit of doing other things. And then as you learn how to do it, you start to recognize you get this flavor from it. You're not actually alone. You're always with Krishna. Krishna never leaves us for a moment. We wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to do anything unless Krishna was doing it. And you become aware of that. Anytime you become aware of Krishna, you also become aware of he does things sweetly. Everything about Krishna is sweet. And if Dravida was here, he would have a poem about how everything is sweet about Krishna. He likes those. So you start to recognize Krishna's presence. You start to find him in everything. And that sweetness is Krishna, but you're tasting it. you're tasting the sweetness. So it's your taste, but it's him that you're tasting. So that's a taste, actually. So that taste, that was the next. Well, actually, before that stage is anartha-nivritti. You start to see those things which aren't needed, which are just bad habits, more or less, and you start to consider that these things are the only thing that's separating me from being with Krishna. There's a couple things here, and they become less and less significant when you recognize it was just a bad habit. In fact, I remember when I was growing up, my parents used to smoke cigarettes. They didn't know. No one back in the 50s and 60s, they didn't know that they were bad for you. In fact, they sometimes they would tell you they're good for you. In fact, one commercial, I was thinking about seeing if we could find this old commercial. The commercial said that 100,000 doctors all smoke Camel cigarettes. Can they all be wrong? Nowadays, they wouldn't show that commercial again, but that's what they said. So, anyway, you start to see that, so with my parents, it came out around 63, 64, something like that they're bad for you. They could actually cause cancer. So they just stopped. One day they said, well, we shouldn't do it anymore. And they just put it aside. There was no patch, there was no gum, there was no big deal. They just said, it's not good. They stopped. So that was amazing now when I think back on it. So the same way, when these anarthas dawn on you, that these are bad for my relationship with Krishna. This is not good for me, it's not good for Krishna. This is bad. So you give it up. And then when you give up your bad habits, it's called nishtha, which is fixed. Fixed in, now you have good habits. You're fixed in your good habits, which are called self-realization. You're functioning as a soul. Your intelligence is in order. You're doing things right. How nice. And when you do that, you get this taste starts developing, as I was pointing out. You're starting to recognize how Krishna is doing everything, but he does everything lovingly. That's all that he has. He's just very intelligent, funny, loving, and he's reciprocating if you want to. So that taste leads one. Actually, you start following your taste, and it leads you to becoming attached to Krishna. And this attachment, very quickly, in this attachment, emotions are present. And that's a preliminary stage of pure love, these emotional relationship with Krishna. So that's a little bit how that works. Now, if I answered your question, most of that has to be experienced. So in Krishna consciousness, you can talk about something. Like, suppose you never ate an apple, and I told you an apple was, well, some of them are red, they're juicy, sweet, crisp. So you could also repeat that they're red, round, juicy, sweet, crisp. And it's correct, but when you eat an apple, you experience it, and then you can also say, well, it is red, round, juicy, and sweet, and crisp, but there's something else there. So this knowledge is called realized knowledge. It's not simply to repeat it, even though it is good to repeat it. Krishna says, Shravanam Kirtanam. After you hear it, you repeat it, and that also helps you to understand it. But if you follow the principle, you make this decision about fruitive activities, devotional service. You get that clear distinction between one to the other. And you'll see almost everything is just helping you see the difference between what is matter, what is spirit, the controller of both. That's knowledge. Put your intelligence in order, and you get a taste by chanting Hare Krishna. Krishna is present when you're chanting. It's just, how are you going to relate to Krishna? Do you know how to relate to Krishna? Does that? Who knows? Even the great devotees we're reading about. What's her name in Bhagavatam? The mother of the demigods, Aditi. She met Vishnu after performing her sacrifice, but she couldn't hardly talk. You just get so shocked. How Dhruva Maharaj, when he saw Krishna, he was stunned, and Krishna taps him with his conch shell, and he starts to talk. So we're learning. Do you know how you're going to relate if Krishna was right there now? What would you do? How would you relate to Krishna? So we're just learning that, and we're practicing, and we're seeing the nature of what this material world is made up with, why there's a body concept of life, how the body concept of life is so constituted, and then gradually we actually, in the mode of goodness, we learn what to fear and what not to fear. So we're afraid of how quickly we can have everything forgotten in an instant. One glance, it says, the male, female designations, there's a natural attraction between the two of them, and with one little glance from the eye with a smile behind it, then the bodily conception of life takes over. Even a man of knowledge who can discriminate. So our safe position is param drisvanavardante, is a higher taste. And then it says the embodied being may be restricted from enjoyment, and even though the taste remains, but by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So he gets this pragya, strita pragya. And that's what we want, because Krishna will rendezvous with you in your intelligence once it's in order. And he'll show you the light, as we were just talking about, this light of being able to discriminate him and devotional service directly or indirectly, impersonally, fruit of activities, and you just cycle back through the animal species of life, trying to find water in the desert, running after the mirage of the bodily conception of life. Hope that was all right. I think there's another question. I'll read that one. Excuse me for a second. Here it says, Adi, is it? I have a question. When I was a new devotee, I was chastised for thinking of my own examples and coming up with my own ideas that I thought might help to express Krishna conscious philosophy. You said you'd like to come up with sayings of your own from time to time. Could you comment on this, please? Well, I also get in trouble from time to time, and I also get chastised. But actually, there was a nice discussion that took place here. It was interesting. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was 2 sannyasis here, guru sannyasis, very advanced devotees, but they were at different ends of the perspective on this point. It was quite interesting. We had Dhanavir Maharaj on one side, and we had Hridayananda Maharaj on the other side. So in a class, Hridayananda Maharaj, who comes up with many examples that are quite witty and entertaining and very clearly making the point. So Dhanavir, he also brought up that same point to him. Dhanavir, he's Maharaj. He also speaks very succinctly, that repeating exactly as Prabhupada said it. So I went back and forth for a while. I even recorded it because I thought this is a classic moment. Hridayananda Maharaj explained that Prabhupada told him to be intelligent and express it in his own words without changing the idea. So for myself, I've understood that there's a principle and there's a detail. This is how I've dealt with this. And the principle is always eternally the same. However, because time and circumstances change, you have to apply the principle to the time and circumstance, and that's called the detail. How to apply it to each time and circumstance. Now, if you don't adjust the detail, then as time and circumstance changes, the previous detail will no longer have the principle in it. It'll become a fanatic or sectarianism. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is where I'm getting this from, he's explained that is how sectarianism begins, and that is how fanaticism begins, is when someone exalts a detail and tries to make it the principle. So, I don't know if that's too complicated or not, but in each situation, one tries to understand what the eternal principle, like we have Nana Shastra Vicharino, that the six Goswamis were expert at studying all the revealed scriptures to establish the eternal religious principles, and thus they're on all over the three worlds, and they're worth taking shelter because they're in the mood of the gopis. However, the principles, the acharya, or persons who have understood the principle and understand how to adjust it, then it's effective. And Srila Prabhupada was the best at that. He got much criticism by his god brothers also when he had women living in a temple. There was never brahmatrini ashrams. That was Prabhupada. Before that time, women weren't allowed into the temples. Women doing artiks, all these different conditions Prabhupada applied. He was very practical in spreading Krishna consciousness, pleasing his spiritual master's order, his foremost principle. And because he did that, if you understand the principle, then you can have the detail fitted. So as far as making up different things, you can't go against what the principle is, but you can expand it. In fact, all the purports are taking the essential element, because a lot of times something is said in one time, and the next time the culture has changed, so the purport adjusts it to fit the present culture. Of course, as a new devotee, sometimes it is a kind of a safe thing to do, but it should be regulated a bit and not shut you down, so to speak. It can be done in a way that you feel discouraged by that and not encouraged. You should always be encouraged in your spiritual life. Is that all right? Okay. See if that makes sense. Thank you. Okay. All right. What do we got for time? Oh. Well, I thank you very much. If you have any requests for next week, I'll be continuing this along, and maybe I'll put some kind of review where we can go over these points, so we can start to see that there's a continuum how we're doing it. At this, we're getting woke up by the internal potency. We've been in external energy, asleep in the bodily conception of life, which is a way to deal with the whole set of circumstances. In Vedic knowledge, it seems like we always group something. Like instead of saying one material desire, another material desire, we can just group material desires. Like, for instance, here's a question. Someone is feeling disturbed because of their material desire. So I ask them, is it because you haven't satisfied this material desire that you're disturbed? Or is it the fact that you have a material desire that you're feeling disturbed? Tricky, huh? So, what do you think? Is it the fact that the desires, because that's what your mind tells you. If I just got this, I'd be happy. But from the transcendental perspective, we group all material desires as say, you can't be satisfied. Prabhupada has explained it. He used the word axiomatic, which is a math term. Take it as an axiomatic fact. You cannot be happy in the material world. take it. As long as you think you can, he says, that is the effect of Maya. That is her influence. You can't be happy here. But try as we will, that's if we ever get that, then we'll surrender very quickly. Thank you very much. Glories to Prabhupada. See you next week. Hare Krishna.